It's a real pleasure for me as a longtime fan to be sitting here with Aaron Gray.
Here with Larry Hama.
We're talking with Kevin J. Anderson, best-selling author.
Mr. Neil Adams.
I am here with David Britt.
Axel Alonso, editor.
Shadow Stevens. And Devil's Comic-Con with John Delancey.
Tom King.
Kevin Conroy.
Free comic book day.
Denise Crosby.
PopCon Pop Expo.
Here on location at Star Wars Celebration.
Sci-Fi Expo, talking for our second time with Gil Gerard.
Wichita, Kansas at Time Eddie.
Producer David Gerald.
I've got Eric Flint.
Are here at Smallville Comic-Con.
Wizard World St. Louis.
VillageCon in Bentonville, Arkansas.
Michael Lombardi.
We were talking with Alan Dean.
Quincy Allen.
Suzanne Landon.
Of Starlog Magazine, Mr. Kerry Oakwood.
Chris Sami.
Len Lee. Dave Schwartz. Mano Intirami. Jason Aaron.
This is Sci-Fi for Me, your portal to the science fiction multiverse.
The Immortal Mask, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure that follows a retired soldier who is given a covenant interview with a death row inmate. What he learns from the interview thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to utilize his military training to survive from being hunted for the information that could topple the most powerful ruling class in the city. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at denali's.com.
Seconds to curtain, folks.
Your favorite podcast, it's Critical Blast.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Barile. Oh, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to finally sit down and talk with you, sir.
Thank you.
We don't get to talk to too many narrative fiction writers. We talk with a lot of comic book creators, and occasionally we branch out to UFO experts. So you're in that middle ground there. So is how long have you been writing? Is this book we're going to talk about your first book, or are you?
Oh no, not by a long chalk. It's my first book that people can easily access. I've been writing most of my life. It's just something that I've always gone back to because the it's an opportunity to tell a story, to share an idea, to influence other people. I teach college writing part time, but I've always loved it. It's also a connection to my family because I come from a long line of readers and people who want to write, but the job and then reading. So I found a way to meet that and still work and still read, but also write.
And has all your writing been on any particular one subject, or?
Actually, not even one genre. I was a playwright, pretty successful playwright for a number of years. I still do that. I have 2 books of poetry out, and I still do that. The Lucha series that we're going to talk about, it's a 7-book. My contract was for 7 books. So the first 4 are done, and the next 3 are in process. And somewhere in the middle, we figured out that I got a kick out of writing coloring books. But here's the thing about my coloring books is they're not image-based. It's not, here's a ball, here's a penguin, here's a golf club. My comic books are, here's a story. Here's Act 1, here's Act 2, here's Act 3. My artist is a brilliant young artist from the Philippines, and we've collaborated at this point on 3 that are out, 1 that's in post, and 2 that are in pre-production. But I've also written a novel. My publisher who published the Lucha book published my novel in 2015. And then I self-publish pulp fiction and little novelettes just, because it's something to do, and if people buy them, great. If nobody buys them, that's okay. All
Pulp
the
fiction. Now you're in my wheelhouse there.
I have a character called Jack Swagger who deals with crime and very, very specific Chicago groove. But what I did, and this is just because of the way I grew up, he's not one of the things because I love to read good pulp, but sometimes pulp gets a little, I don't want to use the word misogynist because that sounds heavy, but they can be a little chauvinistic at times.
Oh, yeah.
So I worked really diligently to make sure that Jack Swagger is not that guy. He's a normal guy. He likes women. He likes them appropriately. He also likes bourbon and Malort and a good sandwich. He's just a normal guy who ends up getting caught in Pulp Fiction. I'm sorry, in these stories, in these storylines, and it's just been a lot of fun to write those.
I love the name Jack Swagger. I can't believe that hasn't been taken by somebody before you got to it there. I get to write sometimes the Remo Williams stuff for the Destroyer book folks. So that's my corner of the industry. But I went to that's too far to reach. Hit the used bookstore recently, just discovered it and found they had a large run of The Avenger from eventually it's the same guy who invented Doc Savage, came up with Richard Benson.
Oh yeah.
It's a fun little. He's got his gimmick. His nerves are dead in his face because of the shock of what happened to his family. So and the blood's all drained out. So he just molds his face and then puts on makeup and he looks like whoever he wants. It's totally not realistic. But everything else after that is blood and guts and knives and guns, and noir. But where we're at tonight is very far from noir. We are looking at Aguila Azul, which is the first of your Lucha. I keep trying to say Lucha Libre, Lucha Legends series.
Right.
And this is marketed towards more of the younger reader.
Yeah. Junior high to early high school.
Yeah. So what's your love of the Lucha? What made you say this is what I want to write about next? Not just a book, but a series.
Right. So the community of Lucha Libre is amazing. This is the point. Like book 1 is a luchador. Book 2, which is coming out pretty soon, is a luchadora, a female luchador. Excuse me. Book
which
3,
I didn't even know existed. So
sure. Oh, Google that sometime. There's really talented and really amazing people. Actually, right now on the Netflix, there's a show called Against the Ropes, and it's a brand new show. It's about a luchadora who's trying to get her daughter back, and some actual professional luchadoras are in the TV show. It's pretty fun to watch. So book 3 is about the ring announcer. Book 4 is about a ref. Book 5 is about a guy who writes about Lucha Libre. So each book, rather than just do stories about luchadors, it's a way to celebrate the community. So I go to probably 3 shows a month, and you got the guy who's making the tacos, you got the lady who's selling the churros, you got the guy who's selling the masks, you got the kid who's sweeping the floor and getting the chairs lined up. These are you got the big guy in the back with the drum. These are the people that make Lucha Libre such a passionate undertaking. It's magical. I've met people over the years, and it's like this really amazing, supportive community. It's hard to explain. I got so tight in the community that now I'm a driver. So when the guys land at the airport, the O'Hare Airport, I pick them up at my Jeep. I drive to the shows.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, it's amazing to think that years ago, these are guys that I watched or I saw them on, on different videos, and now they're in my car sharing their French fries with me. It's a cool thing. It's a very cool thing.
We have professional wrestler expert Mike Walters in the chat here. And apparently Jack Swagger has been used by somebody before. Was persona used by Jack Hager during his time in the WWE. Did not know that, because I'm not the repository of wrestling knowledge that Mike is, but Mike's here for lucha knowledge tonight, and will no doubt have questions to ask of you. What little I know of lucha, I couldn't tell you who the greats are and all that, but I do know that in Mexico, the lucha scene it's like how we take the Marvel universe in the movies. It's like, these guys are superheroes, only, you see them on TV, you can see them on the streets, and they'll star in, or at least they used to, they'll star in movies.
Not as much now, but you're talking about El Santo and Blue Demon. Those guys were in books and TV shows and movies, and they wrote songs about them. These days, with their schedule and with their travel, it's not quite as predominant. They still do the occasional TV spot, or they'll do the talk shows and such. But you also got to remember, back then, those guys never took off their mask. So like when Blue Demon would travel, he would send his entourage ahead, and he would travel alone because he couldn't wear his mask in the airport. As soon as he got off the plane, he went to the bathroom and put his mask on. So it was the vibe, the serious kind of intensity was so different back then. They're still careful about it now, but it's not quite as do or die as it was. And also they do 3 shows a week minimum. And I've been many times, I've been in Mexico to see them, and it's a big, huge spectacle 3 times a week. So to have time to do other things, it's not like it was before, where they would, in the old days, they would do a Friday night and a Saturday night, and then the rest of the week was training or traveling. A lot of the guys I work with now here come from AAA, which is one of the big productions there, and they travel all week long. I'll pick them up and I'll say, "Where you been?" And well, last night I was in Texas, the night before I was in Las Vegas, the night before I was in Alabama, which always amazes me that there's Lucha Libre in Alabama. If you've ever been to Alabama, I've spent a lot of time in Alabama. It's not a place where you would expect Lucha Libre, but there it is.
I'm not far from there now. Actually, I'm in Arkansas, but I haven't seen any Lucha Libre around here. But I haven't seen any wrestling where I'm at. It's just not in my corner. Then again, I don't get out a whole bunch, I guess. So, what is it about? I can tell that something sets it apart, but I can't verbalize what it is. Other than the masks, what separates Lucha Libre from American professional wrestling or any other professional wrestling?
Right. So the first thing is the actual practice. Now, years ago when I was a kid, we used to go to the amphitheater and watch Dick the Bruiser and Moose Cholak and those guys, and they were.
Yeah, well, I was in St. Louis for those days. I was. I remember them wrestling at the Chase.
Wrestling at the Chase. Yeah, actually, a friend of mine, Ricky Cruz, is in the book Wrestling at the Chase. He was a wrestler near the end of near the end of the chase days. So those guys are a blast to watch, you know. But as you get older, you start to look at finesse and craft, and the thing about lucha libre, it's such an art form. It's such a beautiful thing. You see things. I've seen easily 150 shows, easily, and I still see things at shows I've never seen before, because they're always trying to take it to the next level. There's the pageantry. You see a guy come out, Mil Muertes, who's a great luchador and a great guy, Mil Muertes. He comes out with this massive headdress and the big collar, the big collar, and when he just walks in the room, you're stunned. You can't even say anything. And he gets up into the ring and he does a pose, and you're in for a good show. It also moves quicker. I went this past summer to Impact shows, a number of Impact shows. Impact is it's a national brand, but they travel, and their shows are good for American wrestling, but it's so much slower. American wrestling is like set up. It's kind of like a Neil Simon play: set up, punchline, set up, punchline. Where Lucha Libre is more like a tango. It's more of a there's less setup, and there's more what they call spots or acrobatics.
I can't say that I know of any heavyweight lucha. The luchas that I've seen, have all been like Rey Mysterio Jr., small, nimble, wiry, so that they can do these acrobatic and athletic flips and things.
Yeah, you're when you go to an American wrestling show, you see a lot of big, buff, very strong guys. Most of the guys, but you also have the guys that are rotund, but they're intimidating. Where there was one luchador called Super Porky. He was completely round, just a completely round dude who people loved, but they loved him because of who he was. There's a guy now called Nino Hamburguesa, or the Little Burger Boy, and he is also a big guy, a real big guy. But those big guys are nimble. They're nimble. Yeah. I saw in November, I saw a 450-pound guy jump over the top rope onto the floor, and he landed about 8 inches from my foot. So there's a whole level of deeper investment. Yes, the Gulf Coast territory. It's going back a number of years before the McMahon family ruined wrestling. But yeah.
Well, you're not the only one to think that. Just to say that. You know what? I was going to say about how the luchas. When with El Santo and stuff, there were these legends built around the character. And it seems like, with American wrestling 30, 35, 40 years ago, they tried to do the same thing with things like The Undertaker and characters like that. There was this legend about the character. And it seems like that kind of got lost with the WWE, WWF merger that happened. It just sort of all trickled away.
Well, it was, the problem was, so it's cyclical. So there were eras that were powerful and sexy and fun, and then they tried to clean it up. They went a little too much, and then it became this very sterile product that you went, oh, well, I can watch family classics, and it's the same thing. So they seem to have lost that the power, which, going back to the territories. Before the McMahons ruined wrestling, there were territories, and you became a legend in your territory, and your name, if you could reach another territory and get booked there, right? And that's how it built up. Oh, this guy from St. Louis who can drink 44 beers and then go in and wrestle a bear and then come out and all that stuff was so important in American wrestling, and that's what really, I believe, got people, because wrestling popularity is also cyclical. In the 30s and 40s, huge. 50s, it was by the 60s, early 70s, not so much. But then Hogan comes along and the territories begin to shrink, and the TV begins to grow, and we have another big burst. The thing in Mexico, there's so much legendary built into it. When your name is Mil Mascaras or A Million Masks, or the Blue Panther, and your mask is this beautiful Blue Panther face. I have probably 20 masks, which in the scheme of things is nothing. My two traveling buddies, one of them has 101 masks. The other one has easily that many. Yeah, and these guys, excuse me, they'll pay $100 to $300 for it. I have two that I paid a lot for. One was Drago. If you remember Lucha Underground, there's a guy named Drago who is one of my favorites. I got one of his actually ring-worn masks. But to be honest, when I go to Mexico, I go to the market, I buy a bunch of masks for $6, and it's just the same as those guys spending $300 on a mask. Sure. I still get to look at the mask. I got one of the last. I got a Super Muñeca. The Super Muñeca is a doll, but there's a luchador called Super Muñeca. I got to see at the end of his career. I got to watch him work, and then when I was in Mexico, I got his mask, and it's those kind of stories that keep you coming back to Lucha Libre.
Yeah, it seems like when territories get absorbed, it sort of homogenizes things. I used to watch wrestling 25 years ago even, and I remember getting kind of okay, it's boring down. And then my wife and I went to some pizza restaurant, and they're like, oh, they're showing wrestling. We'll sit down and watch it. I have no idea who these guys are. They must be new. Next thing I know, this guy's taking a 2x4 wrapped in barbed wire and beating the guy with it in the corner. I'm like, this doesn't happen. And it was our first introduction to this little thing called ECW.
ECW, yeah.
And I'm like, okay, we want to watch more of this. And sure enough, within like 2 years, it got absorbed into WWE, which was WWF or WCW at the time. And like, yep, it got watered down and it didn't have the same appeal anymore.
Right. So this past June, I was in Philadelphia for the Lucha Libre Expo. It was this big expo. I got to meet guys who've been around forever, some guys coming up, and it was held.
Mike's dropping trivia in the chat. Don't.
Right. Well, no, he's right. National Wrestling Alliance governed a lot, but not all. You had to get into the National Wrestling Alliance. There's a series on YouTube that breaks down each of the territories. I've been watching that just because it's interesting to see the crossovers. But NWA was kind of a governing body that governed the elite, the well-respected groups. But there were a lot of groups working. So I'm in Philadelphia for the Lucha Expo, and it turns out it was in the stadium that used to be the ECW building. It was their building. So if you go in the bathroom, there's a big mural, ECW, with blood and barbed wire. And it was a place where all the ECW shows were done. And some of those guys, like Juventud Guerrera and Psychosis, who came from AAA and CMLL into ECW back in the early days, for them it was their first time back, because ECW, when they kind of went away, when they dissolved, the building wasn't used for wrestling anymore. So it was amazing to be in that historical building where ECW broke so many barriers. That was amazing.
So circling back to the book, because that's why you're here.
Yeah,
we could talk wrestling for a while, but is your character? Well, first of all, you mentioned Dr. Muerte a little bit. You include him in here as a character in the book. Does he know? I mean, do you know him well enough to say, "Hey, can I do that?" Or is it a different?
No. So Mil Muertes is the wrestler. Dr. Muerte is a fictional character.
Okay.
Yeah. But having said that, there is a character in here named Jabali Rodriguez Jr., who is a real wrestler from New York. And one of my first wrestling shows, I saw this guy work, and it knocked me out. This guy, he was one of those guys who was big and buff, but super agile. He knew how to work the room. He knew how to work the ring. He was what they call a rudo. So in luchador, the rudo is the heel, right?
Yeah.
Technico is the baby face. The rudo is the heel. This guy was electrifying. So after the show, I walked up to him. We took pictures. We talked. That's another thing about Lucha Libre shows. When you're at a Lucha Libre show, people take pictures with you. They sign autographs. Last weekend, I met Lady Apache. Lady Apache is a legend in the game. And I got to hang out with her for 10 minutes and get pictures just because she's in a Lucha show that I was at. So with American wrestling, you go to American shows, you got to pay for autographs, pay for pictures, So Jabali is a real character. Now, I'm going to shift gears for just a second. This is a coloring book called Where's Yeska? And this is actually a guy called Mr. Iguana. This is a real wrestler, Mr. Iguana, who is AAA. And he and I are good friends. I've driven him a number of times. We've hung out a number of times. And his appeal is so amazing with the kids that I said we should do a coloring book. And the thing about this, for those who are interested, it's in English and Spanish. So
as you've done with Aguila Azul.
Right. And Aguila Azul and Kid Chaos. But we'll get back to that in a minute. So what I did is I started to write. So one of the things that's kind of my calling card is, you can't tell from this angle, thankfully, I'm a little overweight. And I like to find the humor in that rather than be sad that I'm overweight. There's a lot of humor in that. So I created this character called Lucky Lucci, and it was going to be about an overweight luchador getting into shape to go wrestle. And as I'm writing it, I'm realizing this is an actual story. This isn't a joke. This is a legit story. And so I took out the base comedy, focused on some honest, authentic humor, and came up with The Legend of Aguila Azul. Now, we do the occasional bookstore, or I'm doing some libraries in the spring, and there's a young kid who's 15 who's a professional luchador. And I gave him a copy of the book. He does shows with me. He'll come to the show. He'll flip people around. He's a little bitty guy. And he told my publisher, he said, I didn't know Paul before this, but this is my story. This is what I lived. This is my story. So Septico Dragon, who, like I said, is 15 years old, when we first watched him come out, he looked like he was embarrassed to be in the ring. He was a little teeny guy. He would slither out to the ring. And now he flies as high as any wrestler I've ever seen. He's got more savvy in the ring and more guts. And so, like I said, I'll have him come to my readings. He'll work with other luchadors. He'll hang out with the kids. But there's a whole bunch of kids that are teenagers who are doing this, who are making money doing Lucha Libre.
That's what I got hung up on there when you just said 15-year-old professional. I'm like, what? He's not out of sophomore year yet.
Right. So here's a funny story. So if you know WWE, you know Lince Dorado.
Yeah.
So Lince Dorado is a luchador who worked in WWE. 2 weeks ago at the show, Lince Dorado did a match with us where none of the other 4 wrestlers in the match were over the age of 16.
Wow.
All high school kids in the ring learning their craft from Lince Dorado. That's a story that resonates because I've worked with Lince a number of times. He's been known to jump out of the ring and land in my lap and give me grief occasionally. He's just a great guy. And he spent his night teaching these 4 teenage boys how to work the ring, how to work the ropes. The ropes are such an important part. People don't think about it, but when you run and you turn and you land into the ropes, if you land wrong, you're in the audience. So
you're going to get slingshotted the way you want to.
Right, exactly. So he is a great guy. A lot of the guys, there's a guy called Mecha Wolf who's an NWA champ right now. He's my next coloring book. He's also a very good friend of mine. He does the same thing. He would prefer to work with the young guys, not because there's a challenge. He's one of the best, but he can give, and we had a long talk about this. He's able to give his experience, give back to the young kids, give them the knowledge. So And those are the things that to me are the most important about the community of Lucha Libre. But something else that sets this book apart is, and the series, is there's a glossary in the back. So if I use a term that you don't know, you can just flip to the back. Like, what's an abuela? Well, abuela is a grandma. What is mascaras? It's a mask. What is a batracas? It's a noisemaker, right? But it also, each one is set in a very specific neighborhood in Chicago. So each book has a page or so about that neighborhood. Because I spent 16 years as a Chicago tour guide and a Chicago kind of concierge, and showing my city to people, it's one of my other great passions. So there's just a page about the neighborhood in the back of each of the books, which I think it kind of gives the book a pretty Chicago feel.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now, and it's like that will be handy. But I'll tell you, you did. I'm going not to say anything bad about a glossary. I hate books that start off with 5 pages of you need to know what these words are before going in. Like, no, if you can't tell me what they are in context, then you're not doing a job. You told me what they were in context as I'm reading the book. So you told me what a technico and a rudo was through Gervasio's narration. So that's the way it should be done, I think.
Right.
So kudos on that. And by the way, folks, one of the things that you haven't seen here, you won't be able to see it now, even if I hold this all the way up to the screen. This is written in Spanish, and this is the same text written in English. So what Paul's done here is he's got a book here that and first pages that kind of get split up and down because you got your illustrations in there, but anyone Spanish or English reading can read this book. And if you want to brush up on your Spanish or learn your Spanish, well, hey, it's kind of like watching movies with subtitles on. You can go back and forth and pick out words and see how it goes together. I took Latin, so I can pick a little bit out of everything. But Spanish was never my strong suit. I can order from the restaurant, and that's about it.
I'm actually not as well versed as I should be, as fluent as I should be, but I'm working on it. I have a sister who lives in Mexico, so I go down there once a year, and they drill me. They don't let me speak English when I'm there, so the conversations are short, but they get longer every time I go.
But so, did you write the Spanish on this, or did you get somebody to help you?
My nephew did.
Your nephew, okay.
My nephew is the he is the youngest head of a literary department for UNAM. So UNAM is the state college in Mexico. It's in Mexico City, and he's the head of their literature department. He speaks 6 languages.
Mike is telling me that Rey Mysterio and Chris Candido both started at 16.
Yeah,
and Mecha Wolf 450 and Bestia 666. Now that sounds like he's got to be a bad guy. He's got to be one of the Rudos. If that's current NWA World Tag Team Champions, managed by Bestia's father, Damien. Damien 666. They're going all in on that.
But here's the thing: Damien is the nicest guy you've ever met. So, when they did that Lucha Libre thing in June in Philadelphia, Damien was one of the guys that you got to meet, and his English is about as good as my Spanish, but we had a blast. His son is Bestia. So those two guys they're just brutal. They're amazing. But when you see them, when I sent the images to my illustrator, he was like, "Really? That's our next book? This guy is scary." I said, "He's the nicest man one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life. He's buff, and he's got his face painted, and he's covered in tattoos. But the most beautiful thing you're going to see is when he's holding his baby in his arms. That baby is the most protected baby on the planet."
Oh, I bet.
So,
yeah.
Mecha Wolf has been around for a long time. I usually drive him when he comes to town, and we hang out. We talk because he travels a lot and I travel a lot. So we compare stories about where we've been, where we're going.
One of the early scenes in here is when Gervasio decides that he wants to get truly trained, rather than being, in the backyard doing jumps and kicks and leaps with his friends and having their bones broken because they're training themselves. And he goes to Dr. Muerte. And the scene is it's almost a trope. I mean, this is one thing I've learned. If you want to learn martial arts, first you have to ask somebody, and then you have to do what they tell you, which won't have anything to do with it. Mr. Miyagi is going to have you wash the windows. The sensei at the top of the mountain are going to have Bruce Wayne. They will. You may sweep the floor now. That's what kind of happens to Gervasio. Is like, I want to be trained. It's like, okay, here's a broom. Next day, here's a mop. Next day, here's a rag, a wind squeegee, and then he just keeps coming back until the day that he doesn't even have to ask. Dr. Muerte says, "Get in the ring,
Right.
and let's start training. You will listen to me." So you can't learn how to do something if you're not willing to listen to the experts who are going to teach you to do it, and that's what I think Dr. Muerte was looking for, was that willingness to listen and learn.
Right,
and be humble.
And to be humble. Humble is the key, because we've all seen the guy who knows it all, who goes in to learn and he fails because he already knows it all.
Yeah,
essentially, he didn't know anything and he failed. When you go in humble and you go in with an open book, whatever it is, lucha libre, cooking, basket weaving, if you go in with I actually had.
It's time to get in the ring.
That's embarrassing but funny. I had it on airplane so that wouldn't happen, but somehow it got off airplane. Well, it won't happen again. In the old days, I learned this story as a kid. I used to read a lot about Bruce Lee. In the old days, on the first of the year, 500 monks would show up at the temple. And after a week, maybe 3 or 4 would leave. And another week later, 3 or 4 would leave. And then one day they would dump refuse on them and some more would leave. And over time, they would leave until there was one left. And that was the monk who went in and was able to train to be a Shaolin master. And that always amazed me, that idea that this guy gave it all. He knew he gave it all. And that's what I wanted for Gervasio. My window, whatever it takes, invest all of who you are and you win. And you will elevate your life, you'll elevate yourself, and you will become a character who appears in other books, because they do appear. They're not sequels, but they do appear in each other's stories.
Yeah, because it's a shared universe. It's the real world, basically. I mean, this is not yet that I've seen, but I don't think there's like any magical villain here that the spirit of the lucha must descend upon him and he will be the chosen to fight it.
No, it's there. It's a very real world. It's a very real luchaverse, as my publisher James calls it, a luchaverse. But it's all things. Everything in here could actually happen. Every single thing in here. It's not even it's not even a stretch to say, oh yeah, that could happen.
So what is the because we're leading up to it where I'm at right now. What is the main conflict? I mean, there's got to be there's always something that the hero of any story, of any genre, has to face and then fight his way through to victory at the end. So what is it that is going to forge Gervasio into the Blue Eagle?
Well, so Jabali Junior Rodriguez is the dark version of Dr. Muerte, and he's going to push the right buttons, and he's going to belittle Dr. Muerte, and then we're going to find out that they have a history, and Jabali will let go of it. And so one of the things about Lucha Libre is all about honor. And so when Jabali calls out Dr. Muerte in public, Gervasio's his sense of honor kicks in, and he decides he's going to take the challenge. The secondary conflict is people are telling Gervasio that Muerte is a failure, and he's using Gervasio to get back at Jabali.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's two little conflicts that are going on, and as always, The one person that has all the knowledge, who can fix everything, is Abuelita. If you listen to your Abuelita, everything's fine. Because she'll make the eggs, she'll make the breakfast, she'll help you with your homework. But there's a reason that she's there, because she knows everything.
Yeah. And she's the one who knows everything and does know everything, not thinks that she knows everything.
Exactly.
I want to remind folks at the top of the hour, when we're done here, I'll jump over to the mic stand where Mike will be going over the niche news of the day, everything in comics, anime, and professional wrestling, which is most apropos tonight after this. File 13 is in the chat. Hello, welcome. Glad you're here. We're talking with Paul Barile, author of The Legend of Aguila Azul, which is the first in the Lucha Legends series. I have to keep looking at it because I keep wanting to say Lucha Libre series. What does that mean, by the way, lucha? I mean, I know it's the wrestlers, but
Right. So Lucha Libre literally translates to free fighting. Libre, free, liberation, liberate, free. Lucha is fighting. That's why a luchador is somebody who fights, and luchadora is the female version.
yeah.
So
And this I did know, Mike. Taking a luchador's hair or mask is that's like knocking a man's hat off in the South. You don't do that.
well, so they do have hair versus mask matches, right? I've seen 2 so far this year. El Torero, who is his mask is so beautiful. I have to hide it sometimes. So I just want to look at it. I know that sounds weird, but it's beautiful. Anyway, he fought a guy called Joey Marks, and he pinned Joey Marks. So they shaved Joey's head in the ring, which was beautiful.
Okay.
And then recently, a guy called Funebre wrestled a guy called Bandolero, hair versus mask, and Bandolero won. So Funebre had to take off his mask. So now when he comes to the ring, he wears it to the ring, but he has to take it off before he wrestles. Just like Dr. Wagner Jr., one of the historical characters who kind of came with the tail end of the El Santo and Blue Demon era was Dr. Wagner. His son, Dr. Wagner Jr., lost his mask in a match. Now he comes out in the mask and he does all the introductions and he pulls it off. Now his son, Galino del Oro, hasn't lost his belt yet, or hasn't lost his mask. That's a big thing. That goes back to Gorgeous George in the 40s. He had the curly. He was the first of the guys to dye his hair, the long curly blonde hair.
Yeah,
and he lost it in the match, and they shaved his head right there in the middle of the ring.
So the story here, you've got a definite bad guy. You've got a situation of honor. Aguila Azul is going to step up and fight for the honor of his, what you call them? They're not senseis, I guess, masters, teachers, instructors.
Yeah, trainer. Typically, the typical word is the trainer or the coach. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is presented now as this is a real fight. This is, we don't like each other. We're going to go at it. Professional wrestling in the U.S., there's a booker. Somebody knows exactly how things are going to go. They've practiced it out. The winner is selected in advance. Let's just put that out there in a lot of things. Does the same hold true with the Lucha Libre style of fighting, or is that more of a if you win, and you get to keep your mask, or if you lose, and you get to lose your mask?
No, so I don't want to say too much about this, except to say that kayfabe is very closely scrutinized. The way that a American wrestling match goes is the same way a Lucha Libre match goes. It's preordained who's gonna go over. It's the spots. They'll call spots, just like if you watch American wrestling and they're locked and they'll say hip toss, whatever. So there's a lot of the similarities there. In the book, I didn't want to break kayfabe. So in the book, I don't break kayfabe, except that there's one scene in a locker room that's a little gray area.
Okay.
But the book does not mess with the legend of is wrestling real, because there's going to be enough people telling people that wrestling is not real. I have a lot of my friends are like, dude, what do you still watch wrestling for? Isn't it wrestling for dumb people?
Because they're athletic.
Yeah, and they're fun, and they, to me, watching what these guys do, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I love watching it. I love the stories. I love the inspiration to keep writing, and and there's a couple guys that we banter, we heckle. And I told the one guy, I call one guy out for steroids, which I don't think he uses them. He's not big enough, but it's just a kind of a funny rib. So I said, hey, how do the steroids taste? He says, at least I'm not fat like you. I said, no, but you're ugly. I can lose the weight. You're always going to be ugly. And we all have a laugh. We move on. But that's kind of the thing about Lucha Libre is you have that good time. And after the show, you shake hands with that guy, and you see him next week, and you find a new insult for him.
Yeah, that's they know how to fight. They know how to fall. So they're working with each other in a sort of a ballet. Go tell one of them they're not doing something real. You don't know how to fall, and they do know how to throw you.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So I go into it with that mindset. Now the stories that they craft around it sometimes, that's a different thing. That the soap opera aspect, that's kind of fun. I got really into the NWO. I don't think I'll ever forget the moment when Hulk Hogan ran after Nash and Scotty, and was like, oh, he's gonna get him now, and then he turns around, just rips his shirt off, and there's an NWO shirt. I'm like, oh my God, oh no, this can't happen.
The earth shifted that moment. Right.
Yeah, it was a sea change in wrestling, and you could feel it everywhere. that the take your vitamins and pray every night before you go to bed guy was now a heel.
He was gone. Yeah.
So does that happen in Lucha? Do the Technicos become Rudos and vice versa?
Absolutely. Ricky Cruz, the guy I told you about from the Wrestling at the Chase, he was part of a thing called Society Boricua, which is Puerto Rican, and he and his three guys would go to all the matches, and they'd help each other out and be a little sneaky, and then one match they just turned on him and beat him up, and suddenly he's a Technico. And he did great as a Technico. He held belts for a while, had a blast, and now he kind of wants to go back to being a Rudo. Here's an interesting idea. If you know a guy and you go to a show, you have to ask him what he is in that federation. When I go to see Ricky, back when Ricky was a Rudo, we would go down to St. Louis to see him. He said, "You guys, I'm a Technico here, so don't boo me and don't heckle me. I'm well loved here." And that happens a lot when you talk to wrestlers. Depending on what federation they are, tells you how you should react to them, if you should be nice. I heckle everybody, so I do, that's just
treat them all like Rudos.
Equal opportunity.
Right, while we've been talking here, I want to remind people I do have the link to this book right below the video. It will take you straight to Amazon. Because we can monetize Amazon. I'll be quite honest about that. We make 25 cents a year off everything that comes out of Amazon. We still link to them. But, you can get this just anywhere books are sold. If you want to go out and just go to your favorite bookstore and say, I want The Legend of Aguila Azul by Paul Barile, and they will get it for you. You had some other stuff you were showing me before we went live here that you wanted to bring up.
Yes, I do, actually. So a couple years ago, I had a couple of dates with a woman who just didn't get Lucha Libre. Brought her to a show. She fell in love. Not with me, sadly, but with Lucha Libre. So
there's a country song in there somewhere.
There is. She said to me, if you were a luchador, what would your name be? And without even skipping a beat, I said, Kid Chaos. I'm Kid Chaos. And that was it. Then we didn't bring it up again. We talked about other stuff. And a couple of weeks later, I wrote the story of Kid Chaos. So this is Kid Chaos. All right. This is a coloring book. This is another one of the dual language coloring books. So every graphic on the one page, you can't really see it with this light. I apologize. But each of the images, the story is told in both languages. Excuse me. So this is the Kid Chaos versus the Sandman. Now, this is not the ECW Sandman. This is the actual Sandman who wants you
the one that put people to sleep.
Right.
Okay.
So people started liking this book. People were buying it. People were having fun with it. And we decided we needed to make a friend.
Oh my goodness!
So this little
Kid
guy,
Chaos is a plushie.
yes, this little guy, and you can see on the back, Kid Chaos, and he's available through the publisher, lexigraphicpress.com. Now, my personal Kid Chaos is very valuable to me because a guy named Pentagon OM autographed his eyeball. If you know the Lucha Underground or AEW or Impact, excuse me, winter in Chicago this is the driest place in the world.
Yeah, I spent some time in Chicago. I went to college in Chicago, Lombard.
Oh, all right, yeah, that's not far. So Pentagon is huge. When Pentagon comes to your building, he gets hired to come in and sign autographs, and people will pay $75 to meet him for a minute and get an autograph. That's crazy. I worked security for one of his events, so I brought a doll and I had him autograph it. And then his business partner, because he owns a store in San Diego, his business partner ordered a bunch of dolls and coloring books. Can't beat that.
Well, yeah, that was worth the investment right there.
Yep.
So now I have to ask, stuffed Aguila Azul in the future. I mean, you could do a line of that.
We got a guy in Mexico. We're gonna go more action figure with that because that's a little more like this. This is for the little ones. The little ones love this. I show up at shows and I bring this package.
Yeah.
And I say, Mom, come on, Mom, what are you doing? And of course, any little kid sees that face, and that's it.
They want to wrestle with it.
Yeah. And this is called Where's Yeska? Now this one, and I'm going to tell you this little secret. I didn't tell everybody, but this is so Mr. Iguana is a real wrestler. He's from AAA. And if you look on his shoulder is Yeska. Yeska is his iguana that he brings on stage with him and gets involved in all the matches.
Oh, okay.
So throughout the book, what happens is he loses Yeska, and he goes around the world trying to figure out where Yeska is. Now, here's where it gets a little bit for the adults, because I spent years of my life teaching Head Start, which here in Chicago is 3 and 4 and early 5s for folks that can't afford, the expensive daycare. So, right. So I taught 6 years. I taught Head Start, and the one thing that always bugged me was that the kids' books were written for kids. Let me explain. Who reads kids' books? Adults, because the kids can't read. So let's throw a little something to the adults, so the adults can be like, this is kind of good. I'll read it again. So here's the thing. Mr. Iguana's friend Yeska disappears. He searches the whole world, and he finds Yeska. And what does he and Yeska do? They eat pizza. In Mexico, Yeska is slang for marijuana.
Oh.
So Yeska disappears. Iguana searches the world. He finds his Yeska. And what do you do when you find your Yeska? You eat a lot of pizza.
Yes.
So adults get the joke. Kids get the cool graphics. And you can't lose. So where's Yeska? He actually, this is interesting. He did a promotion Christmas Eve. If you ordered it, if you lived in Mexico City, he had lived in Mexico City. If you ordered it, he would deliver it to your house.
Wow. That would be something.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Open the door and there's Mr. Iguana.
Mr. Iguana with your book. That's a fantastic idea, but I'm surprised because I work with a lot of book creators and comics creators. Some hand delivery. If you're in this city, we'll bring it to you. That's a very clever idea. you said you've got a contract for seven books.
7
on
books.
this, 4 done, and 3 to yet be accomplished.
Right. Yeah. So that one, the next one is Luchadora. It's Hope Rises. It's about a young lady who wants and oh yeah. So before I go any further, every one of them has a little lesson, but it's not like neon lights. It's real subtle lesson.
Yeah.
So the next one, Hope Rises, is about a young girl who wants to be a luchadora, and she's on track to be, except that her father doesn't want her to be a luchadora. So he decides he's going to put the kibosh on it. In the meantime, her grades begin to suffer a little bit. So her mother says, if you get your grades up, I'll work with your dad, work with you to get your dad to let you be a luchador. So she ends up getting tutored by her nemesis, and her and her nemesis become best friends. So it's a little curveball. So this one's about education. It's about sacrifice for what you want. It's about family. I'm a big fan of family history and family mythology, and we learn little surprises about her. Yes, family is a very big deal in Lucha Libre. Absolutely.
He had that up there a minute ago, and you just walked right into him like, click, throw it up there.
A lot of the great wrestlers are Hijo or son of. Hijo is son of. Like last time I saw La Parca from Mexico, he was working with La Parca Jr. and Hijo de La Parca, or son of La Parca. It's very generational. Even the Fariza, which I can never say their name right. A year and a half ago, I met the grandpa and did pictures with him in Mexico, and now I've met most of his sons. The Villanos, there are 4 brothers, and all of their, maybe 5, all of their brothers and sons, and yeah, it's family is a huge part of Lucha Libre.
I would imagine that you would be wanting to work with the marketing departments for whoever's doing Lucha in Chicago to set up at the shows with the book stands. Is that something that you use as a tool for getting the books out there?
I do. I set up at the shows. The big shows that I'm involved with, I set up there. It's a kind of a dicey because a lot of the guys, that's a big part of their living is selling shirts and hats and this. Yeah. So I don't want to cut into theirs. So I don't do it at all the shows. I show up once in a while, put the stuff out. But like I do in a couple of weeks, I'm doing a school. I do libraries. I do bookstores. Right now, Lucha Libre is just starting to really just blossom. There's a movie came out recently called A Man Called Otto, right?
Yes.
With there's an amazing Lucha Libre angle in that movie.
I did not know that was in there, so now I've got something else to watch for it in it.
I didn't know, and I brought my girl and my girlfriend, and she had seen it like 2 nights before. And they would sit down and we were watching the movie. And at one point, she just nudged me. What? I'm watching the movie. And I turn around, boom, I'm hit with Lucha Libre right there. So it's definitely it's definitely getting into the consciousness.
Very cool. Well, Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight and introducing us to your connection to the world of Lucha Libre. And I'm looking forward to finishing the book now. I know what's coming, but now it's kind of like a Karate Kid, just with jalapeno. I don't know. I tried to be funny there; it failed. But
I got you.
But
well, I just want to thank you for this. It's there's 2 things I love to talk about: my writing and Lucha Libre, and to be given an opportunity to do this with you in front of people who care about stories and storytelling. And really, I wrote 1 comic book. It didn't sell very well. We're trying again. I'm trying a new comic book this summer. I know the craft of writing comic books is so intense. I have so much respect for comic book writers and writers in general. So I'm grateful for the time to talk about my little stuff.
Stick around after the show. We'll talk. Everybody in the chat, thank you so much for coming out tonight. We do appreciate you being out there. We don't have a show without you. We're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. So we always appreciate you coming out and catching our viewers. If you are watching this on the replay, again, the link to the Amazon link for Aguila Azul is right below, or you can go to lexigraphicpress.com and order just about everything that Paul's got out there related to this. And we do encourage you to do so. And with that, as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you. Good night.